Hi, this is Brandon with Precision Defensive Solutions, and we are sitting here in Manhattan, Kansas. It's been a couple of years since we did a roundtable with us, and so we got Tory Soper here and Chris Griese over here, and you know we're going to have a little conversation. So one of the things that I started thinking about was Tory just started getting into some competition shooting. So how long has it been since you started getting into competition?
So it's probably been just this year, really.
Okay.
Since I've not done very many competitions, and they're kind of spaced out. But I think it's probably been about a year since I really kind of started gearing towards it.
Yeah, getting your feet wet a little bit.
Yeah.
And,
But I started with some steel challenge and then moved on. Once I did a couple of those, I did a USPSA match, and then it was a while, but I just did another one here a few weeks ago, a USPSA match. So I'm hoping I can start adjusting my schedule to get in some more, because I'm really having a good time with it.
yeah, you're having a good time with it, and I think that's one of the things that grabbed me. And one of the things I asked Chris is if he had ever competed. So why don't you talk about your competition history?
Yeah, honestly, I got into IDPA. That was the competition that I did, and that was probably over a decade ago. There's been little since I've done that. So I've done, within the past year or two, I've done a few IDPA matches.
Okay.
But that was the majority of it. That being said, one of the places that I teach comes from a very competition-heavy background, which also lends to the discussion that we talked about having tonight. So.
Yeah. So the way that I wanted to go with this, because I've thought about doing some competition. I haven't done it yet. Too busy with classes and things like that, which is a good thing. But I'm really kind of wanting to maybe cut my teeth a little bit, at least get a little taste of it. But one of the things that I think is a rising question is there a connection between competition shooting, USPSA, IDPA, because International Defensive Pistol Association, is there a connection between actual defensive training and competitive shooting? Now, my approach in the defensive world is coming from my martial arts background, where in all reality, martial arts competitions are not defensive training. They're, at all. They tend to be very showy. Anymore tend to be very gymnastic. Flair and things like that really don't lend itself to any practical situation. So I've watched some videos of competitions, and I've watched videos of Tory competing, and I see some connection that could be there, but I'm really kind of looking at it from an outsider's perspective. And I'm kind of like, yeah, maybe there's something there, and maybe there's not. So what do you think, guys?
So for what I've done so far, I don't know that for me I would call it a defensive type of scenario. I think what the competition does for a person is it forces you to focus on your accuracy.
Okay.
While putting some speed to things, because of the way they're scored, you have to have your A-zone hits as fast as you can, but you don't want to run it too fast that you're missing, because your time is going to be, you're being too slow is going to hurt you more than missing your shot, if I'm remembering that right. Mm-hmm. But so for me, it's really kind of what I'm seeing as far as defensively is you're learning what your max speed is. Where is your wheels going to fall off?
Mhm.
Where are you missing those A-zone hits? When do you need to slow down? And it's making you put more focus on your irons or your dot or whatever, because you have to have that. You're trying for a score. You have to have that A-zone hit, for maximum score. Is it defensive? I don't know, but it's definitely increasing my skills as a shooter.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what do you think, Chris?
I think that given an honest conversation about the topic and digging down into it past just a surface level, it absolutely is something that can be beneficial for the purposes of. So we take training classes,
Right.
and besides the fact that we enjoy shooting, we enjoy turning money into noise and sound, right? Some of us, maybe some of us in this room, maybe all of us in this room, are a bit of training junkies, right? So there's that. Sometimes it's fun just being social and being in those classes too.
Sure.
But we take the classes in part because we find value in them. We find value in training with our weapons, with our guns, understanding how that works and how they work in a real life, aka self-defense, defensive perspective.
Right.
I guess sort of lost my train of thought there, but I think we do the same thing, and there is the same thing. There is the same value, can be the same value as far as training in shooting, in competition shooting. You can say, but it's a competition. It's a game. Okay. Let's be honest. A number of us, and I'm sure a number of our watchers, have been to classes where there is, I believe, somebody, I can't remember who said this, called them, where there's shooting Pokemon, right? Got to catch them all. Whether it's a coin or a patch or something, right? There's always some of the accolades, the certificate. You're the top this with whiz bang that.
Yep.
So that's a game.
Sure.
For a prize,
Right.
just like a competition is. Now, again, that's another training class. It's not real life. I guess I'm saying all these things to say there's absolutely a lot of parallels. And then what is the approach that you take to this? I think is in part, just real quick, just as you were talking and I'm listening, I'm just doing some typing and thinking, real quick, a list of pros I came up with. I get to know my gear and how that runs under at least basic speed and use. Maybe not torture testing, maybe not, oh my gosh, I'm in the fight for my life and I'm grappling hard.
Mm-hmm.
But at least a base level, I get to know if I pull this thing, this mag out from a mag carrier off my belt and it comes out with a mag carrier, well crap, my gear's not set up right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to understand and test to some degree my gear. You can probably very much speak to this, and I know it was for me in competition stages. There's task stacking, right? There's a cognitive stack. Like I have to pay attention to this and the rules and the this and there's this thing, or I shoot this and now there's a popper and a swinger and so there's a lot of things that I got to pay attention to, plus the manipulation and running of my firearm.
Mm-hmm.
You do well in competition when I get to the point that I am manipulating my firearm to that unconscious competence level,
Right.
where I've myelinated the pathway so well, I can just do what I need to do and focus on what I need to do. And then, again, maybe it's not the same, well, it's not the same thing, most likely. I don't know the neurology fully of this, but as a real self-defense encounter, but it provides some potential stress inoculation.
Right.
The self-induced stress that we put on ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy high when you start thinking about that. But people watching, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? Oh, if I don't make this, I'm not going to get the tchotchke that I need for winning the... Well, and we need that. We would say in the normal training world, we need the stress inoculation to help us when we have a heightened heart rate and we're out of breath and things aren't, as tactile, because that's going to be simulating in some way what we do. That's why we do a force on force too.
Yeah.
So if all those things are there, it's just kind of crazy pants to me that for somebody, and honestly it sticks in my craw, if I'm just going to be like blunt about it, somebody who's like, that competition stuff will get you killed in the streets.
We hear that a lot.
Respectfully, sir, I think you, or ma'am, I think you have not thought on any significant level about what you're saying. Because real quick, I mean, it took me 5 minutes to type that. So
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Go into what you're talking about cognitive.
Yeah.
And I've never done IDPA, so I don't know how they work. But I know on the USPSA matches, when you walk up to your stage, there's no given way to run it.
True.
You have to go pick, hey, I want to hit this target, then oh, wait a minute, no, maybe I'll hit this target first. You've got to think your way through that.
other than basic boundaries, like
Yeah.
you can't run all the way.
Right,
up.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But you have to decide how you're going to attack these targets
Yep.
for you.
Yep.
And then you have to remember that. And I know
Yes.
on one of the last stages I did, I walked one of the stages I know 12 times, and I went through each one. I went, okay, I'm gonna hit this one, this one, this one. Then I'm gonna come around here, I'm gonna hit this one, this one. I'm gonna hit this. I'm gonna come back and get these two. Well, these two are hidden over here. They're not visible until here. Well, as I'm doing all this, I forgot about these two. And as I'm getting ready to finish, I went, oh. So I had to come back and get them. So you not only have to find your own way,
Yep.
because I'm not really paying attention to the other competitors as
Sure.
they're walking through it.
Sure.
I'm doing my own thing, and
As
then
you
I
should
got
be.
it. And then I got to remember, and I'm worried about my reload. I'm worried about what's the start position. Am I, the cognitive just, and then all of a sudden you forget something, and it's very taxing.
Mm.
And yeah, it's fun, but I think that does help you with what you're talking about, the stress. I mean, you learn how to breathe through it and just get through it.
Yeah, well, and Tory, you just made a really good point of planning your stage, and then as you go through it and you go, oh, and you got to come back. And being able to open your vision and see everything and kind of just do as you go through it.
Is exactly what we ask for you in self-defense.
Defense.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only difference is we don't have time to pre-see it.
Yeah.
We have to see what comes at us when it comes at us and react to that. And I think that's where, in some cases, if you didn't have the opportunity to pre-walk your stage, it might be more beneficial for a defensive training rather than
So
for heightening your scores.
I know
But-
certain matches that don't allow it,
Really.
whether the outlaw or not. But I also, if I'm not mistaken, so you're talking USPSA, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm remembering correctly, again, it's been probably about a year since a little bit since I last match, and different again, whether it's outlaw or sanctioned, do they have specific rules? But they're giving you the stage all the time, right? So you have a layout, whether it's USPSA or IDPA. They're
Right.
telling you, hey, these are your targets. You don't just randomly have to look for any piece of paper or shoot.
Right.
So you do have some understanding, but I've definitely been in IDPA matches. You can't prep it. Like,
Really?
here's the stage, here's the this. So I know a lot of times, and I've done this in USPSA the one or two times, where you're walking through and then I'm going here, and you're sort of plotting it out with your finger gun, right?
Yeah.
No, you can do this sort of mentally at the stage, at the start line,
Really?
with everybody looking, going. But literally the gesturing, which sometimes gets us that connection, can't do that. I know. So to your point, yes, but even some competition doesn't allow that.
I didn't know that.
Sometimes, and different rules for different places.
See,
and stuff
like
like
now, if you start talking steel challenge,
that. Yes, which is another thing you've competed in.
that's you're standing static, you're in one spot, but you still have to. You want those shots off as fast as you can. You want those dings, but you still have to worry about. So you're losing the cognitive of. You still have to go. Okay, this plate, this plate, this plate.
Mm-hmm.
But you're running it. I don't know how all of them work, but the Outlaws where I go,
Sure.
we run them 5 times.
Okay.
So it's basically five strings, and so by the time I get the 5th string, I've got it. So
Because you've understood it.
so
you've literally,
the cognitive is a lot less, and I can
Yeah.
focus more on my grip and my sights.
which is it makes exactly, but the working and manipulation of your firearm is still there. You're just
Yeah.
getting more fluid with it and better at it over 5 sets. The gear testing, you know what I mean? Like all those things are still there. You're still stress inoculating yourself to some degree. Maybe you've gotten to the point where you've been able to be calmer with that, which just, for me, it proves a level of success with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Again, just sort of powwowing as we're talking. It's not like there are no cons. I'd be the first one to say there's always a downside to something, and that's life. There's pros and cons on everything.
Sure.
You know, I ate some ice cream. Well, that's not going to help me lose any weight. You know, we were just joking about some stuff.
I was
like
just
that.
joking, man.
Yeah, fine, whatever. Shame me. But so understanding and acknowledging that, and that's part of life. There are things. Again, some of the first things that I would hear people say. Well, you know that it's coming. You get a beep. You get told how many bad guys and where they are and what. Nobody surprises you. Well, sure.
I gotta take a little.
Okay. Yeah.
So yes, there's a beep, but your starter's behind you. You're looking at downrange. You got no clue when that beep's coming. You know it's coming.
Well,
you just don't know when.
And I certainly am not the first one to say this. I'm sure Korea, Vascular Protection, Brian Hill, The Complete Bed, any number of others sort of talk about this. In real life, there's a go signal too. It's just not a beep.
Right.
It's
right.
the first time that you throw the punch or the dude starts to come in for the assault or something like that. And yes, I can't be tuned in 100% of the time, all the time. But part of it is if I have a generalization of an understanding of the baseline of my environment and I start paying attention to what's outside that baseline, I pick up the go signal. So I do have a go signal. That would be my counter to that. But yes, certainly there's a pre-planned stage.
Well, and going back to, you know, when we look at human performance standards and we go, okay, well, yes, you get a beep in training, you get a beep in competition. You don't get a beep in real life, but what's faster, visual or auditory?
Exactly, visual.
And it's visual. It is absolutely visual.
Yep.
So, you know, our brain processes that information faster. So when people say, well, you know, the beep, it's harder. It really is harder to process that, you know, from a human performance standard than it is to do it visually.
I've never done a start, whether it be a class or anything. I've never done anything start from the visual.
I have.
It's always been a beep. I've never
never
had that light. Or
my brain is spacing who it was. I like to give accreditation to people if I can. So
sure, absolutely.
But I'm sorry, I can't remember all this, but I remember a class where we did go signals by laser pointers and a green and a red. And so we're sort of running through some verbal, hey, you get away, blah, blah, give me your money, something like some type of things where we're trying to work de-escalation and things of that nature. And then, and so while you're doing that, we're jostling around trying to do, but you have to deal with a 180 and gun safety, obviously, and things of that nature. And we're looking at a target in front of us, that has a red laser in front of us at that time.
Right.
Until the person that is doing all this talking to us hits the green laser, and that's a visual go signal.
Yep.
And I've been on different. I really liked it, so that's why it's bugging me that I can't remember who that is. But
yeah, but again, so if we go back to conference last year, and when Neil Widener was doing the church security, the live fire portion of it, and there's automated flags on the back of the steel targets.
Do you remember who that company was?
I don't right offhand.
Yeah, you might want to check these out. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but take your training seriously. And if you got steel, you've already invested money in it. It's these little, what's that?
Yeah, steel's not cheap.
It's these little like automated signals that throw up cards and then throw it behind the steel.
Yeah.
And they're meant to be. They're meant to. You're not shooting those things. They're behind the steel, but they're meant to be a little bit robust. So you're not breaking them every time. But exactly, that's a visual signal. You're not hearing.
And I think one of the other options too is concealed carry on their timer.
Yes, the range tech shot.
The range tech.
Yes,
it's got a light.
It does.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, you're taking some risk on putting that. Because that's your thing. You're taking a little risk.
But shameless plug to them. As far as I know, they're also one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, range timer out there. So
and it does collect a lot of data.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Some other things that people might say, well, you're playing by the rules. Maybe, like you talked about, martial arts competition. There's a lot of rules, some pageantry, some this. We do this, but you can't do that. When real life, you could say, has no rules.
Well, and that's what a lot of people say is that there's no rules, and there's absolutely rules in a real life situation. It's called court of law.
Well, and not just that. I mean, rules that we're decent people. There's people that aren't going to play by the rules,
Sure.
and those are the people we got to worry about.
Sure.
But we play by the rules until the person that's not playing by the rules forces our hand.
And even
to
then,
do
we're playing
something
just
about
by
it.
a new set of rules at that point.
Right.
It's brought different options to the table. And I'll acknowledge that there are rules in, and one of the ones I think about is on reloads. When I'm working a reload, if I'm working that reload, a lot of people teach in your workspace up here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, finger gunning, my muzzle is towards the sky. And I don't know about you, but I would get DQ'd anytime if this was my muzzle when I'm doing a reload.
Right.
If I'm not having that more directly pointed towards the berm, because I'm pointing my muzzle at that point in the competition.
Okay.
So that's, I'm sorry, DQ being disqualified.
I'm trying to think.
So there are rules that are some like that.
That's right.
Make sure you don't break the 180. So
Right.
stuff like. Again, it's a furtherance as far as I'm concerned. I'll acknowledge that there's rules, but it's a furtherance of what I consider and I have 3 firearm safety rules that are gun safety rules for life. And my point is, those rules aren't just on the range. Those rules are anywhere.
Everywhere.
So I don't just, when I search for a bad guy, if there's a situation where I would need a defensive encounter in real life, I don't just plug shoot and then keep my gun here searching for the bad guy, panning across people. I work to deviate the muzzle.
Right.
It's a rule.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm saying it differently than you want to, but it's a rule. It's just the rules are different. So
That's right.
they're there in life too.
Yeah, it
I can subscribe to that.
yeah, absolutely. It's, which I think will kind of leads to another idea for the next video, honestly, on that. But
Stay tuned, there's more.
there's going to be more. We're here for the week, so just so you know. When we look at because weapon-mounted lights are becoming so popular,
Yeah.
right? But
There's a rabbit trail starting.
Yeah. That's a rabbit hole.
and I think that's gonna and I think that's one of those things that we can look at and why people do it, why they don't do it, and how they do it wrong. But I think and I think maybe we've beat a dead horse a little bit, but I think we've opened some thoughts in this in the last 20 minutes.
I hope so. Obviously I've been pretty vocal about it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It gets me jazzed because I hear a lot of shut off talk.
Mm-hmm.
This is it, and I'm done, and I'm brain shut off, and I'm gonna, and that frustrates me because we can't even have a conversation at that point. But
Right.
to your point, hopefully we have
Open up
promoted
some
some
thoughts.
thought.
Yeah, because I mean, it does induce stress. It does force you to think on the move, and if you miss something, like Tory said, you got to come back and you got to change. And you got to think on your feet, and that is, I think, where people struggle the most in their training.
Yep.
So, thanks everybody. I appreciate you kind of listening to this. And we're gonna get into some stuff on this. So, thanks guys. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having us.